My father said it the way he said everything that mattered. Low, almost gentle, as though he were pointing out a smudge on a window rather than ending something. The shower was at my mother's house on Colgrove Street. Patrice had strung pale yellow crepe paper along the porch rail and set out a tablecloth printed with small storks. There were maybe 14 women in the living room, friends of hers mostly, 2 of mine. My best friend Donna was there. My Aunt Ruth had driven up from Columbus. The cake was lemon, which I had asked for, and somebody had already cut it because the smell of it was everywhere, butter and citrus and powdered sugar, and I remember thinking that the room was about as close to warm as that house had ever felt. My father was not supposed to speak. He had wandered in from the kitchen, glass in hand, and stood near the doorway the way he always stood in rooms he considered beneath him. He waited until Donna was mid-sentence about the hospital bag. Then he said it. "We always knew you'd amount to nothing, Claire. Look at you. 34 years old and you can barely keep the lights on." I pressed my palm flat against the tablecloth. The paper was cool and slightly waxy under my hand. The stork nearest my thumb had a small blue bow around its neck. The room went quiet the way rooms go quiet when something breaks that cannot be repaired in front of witnesses. I looked at him. I did not look away. "Consider me as if I never existed," I said. "Live your lives as though there was never a daughter named Claire." He blinked. My mother set down her fork. Theo, my brother, who had been leaning against the far wall, looked at the floor. I stood up, thanked everyone for coming, and walked out to my car. I knew, driving home on the expressway with my hands at 10 and 2 and the radio off, that I was not going to explain myself to anyone. Not that afternoon. Not the way I usually did, in careful sentences, trying to make the damage make sense to people who had caused it. That part was finished. I am 34 years old. I work as a sonographer at Mercy Regional Medical Center in Denton Falls, Ohio, which means I spend my days in a darkened room reading images that most people cannot interpret, telling them what I see, and doing it calmly enough that they leave the room knowing something they did not know before without being afraid of it. I have done this for 9 years. I am good at it. I live in a house I own on the north side of Denton Falls, not large, 3 bedrooms, a yard that needed work when I bought it and has since gotten it. Marcus, my husband, is a logistics coordinator who works long hours and cooks on weekends and has never once made me feel like the life I built was something to apologize for. We found out about the baby in February. A girl. 11 weeks along at the shower. My father, Gerald, is 61. Retired from a mid-level operations role at a plastics manufacturer that laid him off when I was 26. My mother, Patrice, is 58 and has spent the better part of the last decade managing Gerald's mood as her primary occupation. My brother Theo is 31 and works intermittently in HVAC installation and has never, not once in his adult life, been made to feel that his inconsistency was a character flaw. The hierarchy in that house was not complicated. It just was not spoken. Gerald set the terms. Patrice confirmed them. Theo benefited from them. I lived outside them, which meant I was always in some procedural state of failing to meet requirements that were never written down but were enforced with quiet consistency. I had learned, early and without anyone explaining it, that being useful was the closest I would get to being valued, so I stayed useful and I stayed quiet about it, and I kept a file in the second drawer of my desk at home where I organized anything that might one day need organizing. The kind of file most people never think to keep. The kind that accumulates without demanding anything of you until the day it does. Every milestone I reached was acknowledged with a smaller version of what happened at that shower. When I passed my registry exams, my father said I had chosen a field with no ceiling. When Marcus and I bought the house, Gerald asked whether we had thought seriously about what we were doing. When I told them about the pregnancy, my mother smiled and my father nodded once and asked if we had looked into the school districts. I had learned to carry that particular weight the way you carry anything long enough, without noticing, until the day you set it down and feel how much your shoulders have been doing. That weight had a shape, though. It was not abstract. In the years between finishing my registry and the morning of the shower, I had been the person in this family who showed up when something needed covering. Not loudly, not as a transaction, but as the baseline function of being the one who could. I kept records the way a sonographer keeps records. Not to make a case, but because a record is what the truth looks like when it needs to be read by someone other than you. The layoff happened when I was 26 and already 3 years into my position at Mercy Regional. Gerald had held that operations role for 19 years and had believed, genuinely, that tenure meant security. It did not. The severance was 9 weeks of pay. The mortgage on the house on Birchwell Lane was $1,840 a month. My parents had no savings of any consequence, which was not a secret to me, only to them. I did not wait to be asked. Over the following 2.5 years, I moved money in the ways that needed moving. I covered gaps. I did not itemize them. I did not keep a ledger for leverage. I covered them because the alternative was watching my parents lose a house they had lived in for 23 years, and because I was the one who could, and because I had been raised to believe that family takes care of family, which I still believed, even then. During that same period, my mother had a run of health problems. Nothing catastrophic, but persistent, the kind that accumulates. Cardiology follow-ups, a sleep study, a procedure that was covered only in part. The gap between what insurance paid and what the bills asked for landed at $14,260 over 18 months. I paid it in portions, when portions were needed. My mother thanked me once, briefly, and did not mention it again. My father never mentioned it at all. Theo's situation was different in texture but identical in outcome. He had tried 2 semesters at a community college, stopped. Started a trade program, left it, and landed eventually in HVAC work that suited him reasonably well. During the years of the trying and the stopping, there had been a car, his which he could not make payments on, and a security deposit on an apartment, his which he did not have, and a tuition gap in his second semester that came to more than he had told anyone. I covered all 3, at different points, with different conversations, none of which involved my father saying thank you. What my father said, on the one occasion I was present when Theo acknowledged my help in front of him, was, "She could afford it." That was the architecture of that house. I had known it for years. What I had not known, not until I was sitting in the parking lot of the county recorder's office 11 days before the shower with a folded printout in my hand, was how clearly the architecture read from the outside. The document was 3 pages. It named the property on Birchwell Lane, the market value, the dates. It named everything I had moved, summarized in a format that required no interpretation. I held it in both hands in the front seat and then folded it in thirds and put it in my bag and drove to work and did not decide anything yet. I had simply been willing, until that afternoon in my mother's living room, to keep building inside it. The shower started at noon. I arrived at 11:45 to help Patrice with the setup, which mostly meant rearranging the chairs she had already arranged and agreeing with her choices. The house on Colgrove Street smelled the way it always smelled, lemon furniture polish and the particular staleness of rooms with the windows kept shut, and my mother was in a good mood, genuinely, which I recognized by the way she moved through the kitchen without watching the doorway. Gerald was in the den when I arrived. He acknowledged me with a nod. I said good morning. He returned to whatever he was watching. Donna arrived at noon exactly, with a wrapped box and the kind of energy that fills a room on purpose. Aunt Ruth came 20 minutes later. The other women arrived in clusters, and by 12:30 the conversation was loud enough that my mother was laughing at something by the window. I was seated at the center of the sofa. There were presents on the coffee table. Someone had poured me sparkling cider. The cake was on the dining room table, and the smell of lemon had been in the room so long it felt like it had always been there. Donna was talking about the hospital bag, what to pack, what everyone tells you to pack, what you actually need, and she was mid-sentence, animated, when my father came in from the kitchen. He stood in the doorway for a moment. He looked at the room, at me, at the table with the presents. Something moved across his face that I did not have a word for, only a recognition. "We always knew you'd amount to nothing, Claire," he said. His voice was almost gentle. "Look at you. 34 years old and you can barely keep the lights on." Something went tight across my collarbone. Not anger, not yet, not even grief. Something older and narrower, like a cord pulled taut and held. I pressed my palm flat against the tablecloth. The paper was cool and slightly waxy. The small stork near my thumb had a blue bow around its neck. Nobody in the room spoke. "Dad," Theo said from the far wall. That was all he said. "I'm just being honest," my father said. "She's always been ungrateful for what we gave her. Never satisfied. Now she's going to be a mother and she still can't. Gerald. My mother's voice was quiet. He stopped. He looked at her. He looked back at me. I stood up. Consider me as if I never existed, I said. Live your lives as though there was never a daughter named Claire. My father's expression did not change, not exactly. But something in it recalibrated. The room was absolutely still. You don't mean that, he said. I do, I said. I thanked everyone for coming. I picked up my bag. I walked to the door, opened it, and stepped into the afternoon. I drove home on the expressway. I did not take the radio. I merged onto the 77 North. I took the Millbrook exit. I stopped at the light on Haverford and watched it cycle. I turned onto my street. I pulled into the driveway. I sat in the car for a moment. I went inside. I filled the kettle and set it on the burner. I opened the drawer in the kitchen island where we keep the things that do not have another place. Batteries, rubber bands, a small flashlight, a city map we will never use. At the bottom of the drawer, under a folder of takeout menus, was the printout I had brought home from the county recorder's office 11 days earlier. I had not taken it out of my bag when I got home. I had put it in the drawer and left it there. I did not take it out now either. I set my hand on top of the folder and stood there until the kettle began to sound. I poured the water. I carried the mug to the kitchen table and sat down. I did not call anyone. Gerald called at 6:40 that evening. I let it go to voicemail. The message was 40 seconds. His voice was the particular register he used when he believed he was being reasonable, a kind of administrative warmth, as though he were leaving instructions for a subordinate. Claire, I think there was some misunderstanding today. You've always been a bit sensitive. Your mother is upset. If you want to clear the air, you know where we are. I listened to it twice. Then I called him back. I'd like you to come to the house on Saturday, I said. 2 in the afternoon. Bring Theo. He paused. What is this about? There are some things I want to show you, I said. That's all. He said all right. He said it the way he agreed to things he did not expect would cost him anything. Saturday, 2:17 p.m. My father's car pulled into the driveway. My mother was in the passenger seat. Theo was in the back. I watched them from the front window, then went to the door. They came in. Patrice looked at the house the way she always looked at it, evaluating the furniture, the organization of things, noting them without saying so. Gerald looked at Marcus and gave him the nod he reserved for men he had decided to tolerate. Theo looked at me and away. I brought them into the kitchen. There were chairs. There was coffee which no one touched. I said very little while they settled. Gerald started once, something about the shower, about how I had overreacted, but I lifted my hand slightly and he stopped. I walked to the hook by the door. I reached into the bag. I took out the folded printout. I opened my phone with my other hand and pulled up the supplementary document, the one with the transaction records Marcus had helped me organize, and laid the phone face up on the table. I unfolded the printout and placed it flat beside the phone. The top line read, Property Record 4418, Birchwell Lane, Denton Falls, Ohio. Market value, $638,400. Current ownership, Gerald and Patrice. Beneath it were 3 pages of transfers, dates, and figures. 4 years of supplementary payments, the medical bills, Theo's gaps, not itemized in any accusatory format, just recorded the way records are recorded, because I had asked the accountant to organize them 2 years ago for tax purposes and had simply never needed them until now. My father looked at the pages. He looked at me. What is this? He said. It was not a question. You told me I'd amount to nothing, I said. You said I could barely keep the lights on. He started to speak. You said I was ungrateful, I said. For what you gave me. I picked up the phone and turned it toward him so he could see the total figure on the last screen. I kept the lights on, I said. For a long time. For all of you. The kitchen was quiet. Claire, my mother started. I'm not asking for anything, I said. I want you to understand what you said. That's the only reason I asked you to come. I folded the printout. I set it on the table and left it there. Theo looked at his hands. My father did not speak again for a long time. When he did, his voice had lost its administrative register. What was left underneath it was smaller, and I did not have a name for it either, but I recognized it. I didn't know, he said. I know you didn't, I said. 14 months later, I am sitting on the back porch of the house on my street in Denton Falls while my daughter, who is 4 months old and is named June, sleeps in the bassinet beside me. The county recorder's printout is in the fireproof box in the bedroom closet, where we keep the things that need keeping. I have not looked at it since that Saturday. My father sent a card in October. It arrived in a plain envelope, his handwriting on the front, and inside it he had written 4 sentences. No apology exactly. Something adjacent to one. I read it and put it in the box with the printout. Patrice calls sometimes. I answer when I can. She talks about June and asks after Marcus and does not mention the shower or the Saturday or anything in between. It is a smaller version of a relationship than I once wanted. It is what there is. Theo texted once, 2 weeks after the Saturday. I didn't know either, he said. I should have. I wrote back, I know. That was the whole conversation. June is sleeping with one fist curled near her chin. The yard has the particular late morning stillness of a weekday when the neighborhood is at work. I am on leave for 3 more weeks. I reach over and adjust the edge of the bassinet blanket, which does not need adjusting. I catch myself doing it and stop. The fireproof box sits in that bedroom closet. The printout is in it. The card is in it. None of it needs to be taken out again because all of it already happened, and what I carry forward is not the wound. It is the record of what I did, which is a different thing entirely. If any of this sounds familiar, the silence you kept while keeping everyone else afloat, the room that went quiet when someone finally said what had never been said, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Not to relitigate anything. Just so they know it is not only them. June shifts once in the bassinet. I leave my hand near the edge, not touching, just present. That is enough.